Log date, June 1st, 2025. Well, it's officially been over 7 months since the last update, and today, just like yesterday and the day before that, we're alone. Less and less people have been showing up for work at the company these days. By and large, the moons are emptier than ever. It's pretty lonely around here, but still, day after day, I set out in search of loot. Somebody has to keep that thing in the company building fed, at least until we can learn more about it, and if that burden falls on me, so be it. After all, I did swear a vow to uncover its secrets. Get it, vow? Unfortunately, once again, nothing new to report. Everberon, over and out. Whoa, wait a minute, what's that? Aw, what the heck are you? What's going on, little guy? Never seen you around before. You're kinda cute in like a weird, messed up sort of way. What are you doing out here all alone, though? That doesn't seem right for a little fella like yourself. Is your mama around? She's gotta be somewhere. Maybe? Ladies and gentlemen, after months and months of waiting, the day has finally arrived. Lethal Company version 70 is now live, and boy oh boy is there a lot to explore. This update brings with it a brand new furniture system, new rooms and revamped generation inside of mansions, a massive overhaul to the radar system in the ship, and much, much more. And I've gotta say, I've been having a lot of fun with it. As I'm sure most of you will agree, it feels great to finally have some new official content in Lethal Company again after such a long period of absence. And from the perspective of gameplay, what we've got here is pretty incredible. But as always, if you've been around this channel before, you'll know that the real reason I've been itching to get my hands on this update was not for the great quality of life improvements, nor even the new gameplay features, but rather because of the lore, the story that's been unfolding since this game's release. And in that respect too, version 70 has certainly not disappointed. The more I played, the more I realized that story-wise, this is really an update about Sigurd, a character who many will know is at the center of one of the oldest plotlines in the entire game. A plotline that just got a lot more complicated. I don't think I'm overstating when I say that I think this is probably one of the most important Lethal Company updates, and there's a lot more to demystify here than I ever could have expected. So together, let's work our way through everything, piecing together a picture of just what has changed so far, and of course, taking a look toward the future. This is the hidden lore of Lethal Company's version 70. Before we can talk about Sigurd though, we've got to set the stage, because version 70 is a pretty unique update, one that forgoes many of the conventions we've come to expect of Lethal Company content releases. In general, the scope of the update is very much divided between a number of smaller improvements and additions, as opposed to a single area of focus. Though of course, it ought to come as no surprise that the centerpiece of it all, the overhaul to mansion-style interiors, is the thing that's largely drawn the most attention. Up until this point, mansions have remained largely untouched since their initial implementation at release, and for many, improvements to indoor zones like this one have been expected in Lethal Company's journey out of early access. So a collection of new hallways and rooms complete with interactable props and the promise of hidden loot are quite appealing. However, the mansions are hardly the only areas to have seen a facelift. Adamance is a moon that was first added to Lethal Company with version 50, pretty much inarguably the most content-rich update this game has ever received, and featuring a lush, jungle-laden valley which sits between our ship and the facility entrance, it's a rather unique map topologically. In the lore, Adamance is the largest and oldest of the Green Witches, a system of forested moons consisting of itself alongside the likes of Vow and March, and it's also likely the most feral of its fellows, since it has the highest spawn rate in the game for baboon hawks, roving pack animals that are known to be aggressive hunters. Another species this moon is known for, though, are tulip snakes, small flying lizards that were also added in version 50, and whose multicolored bodies were, for a long time, in stark contrast with Adamance's otherwise drab foliage. But as part of version 70, Zeekers would dub this moon the official tulip snake capital, and completely reinvent the scenery here to offer a more convincing climate for the species. Landing on Adamance today, we'll be treated to a locale brimming with vibrant plant life, including a unique variety of red trees and brightly colored flowers adorning the inside of this once mundane crater. And among the foliage, eagle-eyed employees may be able to spot something else new as well. Standing at nearly double the height of the player, the Giant Sapsucker is the newest enemy added to the game, and a creature that borrows elements from other Lethal Company entities, but in a unique way. At its core, the Sapsucker has but one goal: to protect its eggs from theft and damage, similar in principle to how circuit bees defend their hive. But unfortunately for it, those eggs are apparently quite the commodity with the company. In most cases, these gargantuan, flightless birds are actually quite placid, simply staring down employees with their massive yellow eyes should one get too close to their beloved nest. But if one of their precious eggs is stolen, they'll stop at nothing to regain it, even going so far as to pry open the dropship's hangar door in their rage, and picking apart the bodies of players in the process. As it turns out though, this latter tendency isn't born entirely out of sheer protective instinct, for the employees that it hunts also supply a convenient way to feed their young, which have actually been known to sporadically hatch directly from those stolen eggs right before a player's eyes, often drawing the unwanted attention of the mother. The bestiary explains, quote, "Giant sapsuckers mate for life, and the adult male typically hunts and forages while the female protects the ground nest. They are fiercely protective mothers, partly due to their opportunistic nature, and if anything crosses their boundaries, they will attempt to feed it to their young. They are dangerous to humans as well, and it's recommended to stay out of their territory." All in all, the Sapsucker is a pretty interesting enemy, and along with the other changes to Adamance, the interior revamps, and the various other new and improved gameplay systems, there are certainly a good number of welcome additions to the Lethal Company world. But as we know, none of these are the real reason we're here today, though there is a reason that I've taken some time to bring them up. As we continue forward, some of what we've just discussed will tie back into the story at hand, but for now, we need to move on to a moon that isn't registered anywhere in the company's database, but whose existence is instead hinted at just meters away on the surface of Adamance, in a message scrolled across a wall within a lone cabin at the lowest point of the crater. That moon, of course, is none other than Artifice, and it's here where our story truly begins. The most expensive to access moon in the game, Artifice is a truly special place, and one that I personally have grown quite fond of. It was here back in version 50 where the more diegetic elements of Lethal Company's world building began to first reveal themselves, and where, in my opinion, Zeekers really seemed to come into his own as a storyteller, not just overtly, but environmentally. In the interest of staying on topic, I won't reiterate the specifics of what we presume happened here. I have several other videos already that discuss just that, but with version 70, it seems the moon's trend of significance was set to continue, because nestled among the giant red hangars and the imposing concrete sarcophagus of the main facility, a brand new Sigurd entry can be found, placed neatly on the dusty surface. Now, seeing as we're going to be discussing Sigurd and his logs pretty extensively throughout the rest of this video, and since it's been quite some time since we've had a real conversation about him, it's probably worth taking a moment at this point to make sure that we're all caught up to speed. For those who don't know, Sigurd is a background character in the ancient past of the Thistle Nebula, a former employee who once cataloged his tenure at the company alongside the rest of his crew, consisting of the additional characters Desmond, Jess, and Richard, the latter of whom would later be replaced by the character Lucas following his death. Together, these 5 members constitute the only other team, aside from ourselves, whose existence and company affiliation can be confirmed. But even though Sigurd is well known for documenting his experiences during his contract in the year 1968, which is nearly 600 years prior to the present day of the game, those experiences in question are notoriously riddled with mystery. At first, Sigurd's logs merely focus on mundane tasks and his relationship with the rest of the crew, but as time goes on, his testimonies become increasingly unexplainable, with several occurrences that could only be described as paranormal, adversely affecting him and his team both physically and mentally. Of course, just like us, his crew also makes an effort to decipher just what it is that's going on at the company itself. But just when it seems that the mystery is about to be blown wide open, the logs suddenly end, concluding with a final report written not by Sigurd, but Desmond, in an entry of the same name taking place on October 15th of 1968. It reads, "I am encrypting these logs to keep them hidden, as I fear the system will be wiped if they are found. It's all a guise. We're supposed to think it's just a transaction, but our real job is keeping an incredible terror fed. How long until its fullness ends and its hunger is insatiable? God knows. Maybe it has to do with all these desolate moons. Whoever reads this, I am sorry to burden you with this. Please have a good day and night, as what else is there for us to do?" It's hard to deny the eerie sense of finality here, and this log has long stood as just that, the end of the Sigurd saga, the point after which we presume the team failed to meet quota and was subsequently fired. So when picking up this newest log from the surface of Artifice, it's no surprise that the date presented, October 10th, takes place somewhere before the Desmond log. But as we make our way back toward the ship and access the files in the terminal, something is off, because the Desmond log is no longer the latest one. If we look at the official version 70 patch notes, we can see that Zekers has made explicit note of this log Team Synergy's placement on Artifice. But curiously, what the patch notes don't include is the fact that along with it, the dev has also made a number of fairly significant changes to some of the other existing logs. Now, minor changes to these entries are not altogether unheard of. In fact, Desmond's log itself has had its date changed multiple times throughout Lethal Company's history, but changes to the actual article content, for better or worse, are actually fairly rare, and yet this is precisely what's transpired. At this point, I decided it would be best to go back and reread every entry, and luckily I can confirm that most of the changes presented are relatively inconsequential. There are of course a handful that will be particularly obvious to some players, such as the logs Smells Here and Shady, which have both been renamed to Mummy and Autopilot respectively, but otherwise remain virtually unchanged. However, there are indeed a few areas that are a bit more impactful. The log Goodbye, which takes place on September 7th of 1968, is notable because it makes mention of the death of Richard, a team member whose primary defining character trait, at least according to Sigurd, was his offensive odor, and who seemingly met his demise at the hands of a bracken on the Moon Vow, only to be replaced later by the character Lucas. Previously, the nature of Rich's death was made a lot more obvious, as Sigurd was made out to be one of the team members actively inside the facility at the time of his demise, but the details have since been altered, and in this retconned version, Sigurd was instead on screen duty at the time, meaning he never left the ship at all, and instead, the details of the incident were revealed to him by Desmond and Jess. "They had me on screen duty, and then they all came waddling back, but Rich wasn't there, and they said they couldn't find him. Desmond said it turned his neck, but he didn't see it. I wanted to find Rich even if he was dead, but they are cowards. Their faces are blank like idiots, there's nothing moving in their stupid skulls. All they wanted to do is leave. They were going to leave me too if I went out. We all hated Rich, but we didn't want this." Once again, this might not seem particularly impactful, but, well, just keep it in the back of your mind for later. Then, of course, there's the changes to Desmond, and although relatively minor in volume, the alterations here do reveal a lot of context surrounding the circumstances under which this log was actually penned. The new version of Desmond starts out with a brief disclosure from the man himself, commenting on how he's using the log program he created for Sigurd without the rest of the crew's knowledge. "I'm making this one private to keep it safe from discovery, as it would damage the team morale." After which point, he reveals just what it is that's weighing on his mind. "We might not meet our quota tonight. I believe it's all a guise. We're supposed to think it's all just a transaction, but our real job is keeping an unstoppable terror fed. God knows, maybe it has something to do with all these desolate moons. Whoever reads this, I'm sorry to burden you with this. Please have a good night and work hard, as what else is there for us to do?" So just as we've long suspected, it seems Desmond's log was indeed written as a sort of Hail Mary, a last-ditch effort to make him and his team's situation known to somebody, even if that somebody just so happened to be 600 years too late to help. However, I think this new version of the entry also says quite a lot about Desmond as a character. What we never truly knew before is that this log was created in confidence. His concerns about meeting the quota are private ones, and he's deliberately opted to vent them here rather than rousing the rest of the crew. In some small way, it's sort of a selfless act, and we truly get the feeling that Desmond is the team's leader. Something that's never been explicitly said, but now seems a pretty reasonable assumption. Nevertheless, given the existence of team synergy as mentioned before, we know that Desmond's fears on the night of October 9th, thankfully, never came true. His crew would live to work another day, and yet as the perspective shifts back to Sigurd with this new entry, we're presented with a completely different picture of Desmond's character. October 10th, 1968. I haven't felt like writing, no time, but last night I swear I heard Dad talking to me from the vent, the one under the charger. I don't feel crazy. Man, that's what they all say. Yeah, I know. Well, I'm writing this log to keep myself sane, right? So I'll write about it. He was asking where he was, breathing really deep like he couldn't breathe, like he was getting pulled into the engine. He sounded scared. He said he was thirsty. I never heard Dad like that. Maybe I just don't get enough sleep. Geesh, how am I gonna do it now? Maybe I should just open the thing up and look. Maybe it's 'cause I'm feeling bad 'cause we'd sold the baby bird we stole from the giant wingless one that's always stink-eyeing us on Vow. Man, it could run though. We had to leave on the spot, and Mr. Doofus Lucas has been chattering his teeth ever since. I'm not doing that again. They made me put the baby bird on the desk. I think I shouldn't have done it. I know why they made me do it now. They're even more guilty than I am. Cowards. So I went and told it to Desmond's face. Do your own dirty work. He went all dumb and said, guilty what? For selling the baby bird egg? Then, I can't believe it, he said it's no different than the eggs you eat for breakfast. I said it broke out and looked at us, and I wouldn't eat that. It was alive. And then, what he said, could it carry scrap? Could it get us to the quota? Could it raise our efficiency and throughput and enhance our team synergy? Could it blah 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 blah? His fat stupid lips kept blabbering out like the voice in the company phone. Then he just heaved a big breath like he was satisfied and went back to work like he won the argument. I'll kill him. Desmond, why don't I put you on the desk like I know you all did to Rich? That'll show you team synergy. I poured some grape juice in through the vent. I'm so stupid, I don't know why. It wasn't much. I guess I just thought it won't hurt anything. Very much contrary to how he was portrayed in the last log, it's clear that Sigurd does not see his captain as a benevolent leader. Quite the opposite, actually. And one of the things he alleges here is particularly baffling. The idea that together with Jess, Desmond is somehow responsible for sacrificing Rich to the company following his death on Vow. At first, this seems absolutely preposterous, except that coincidentally, as we already discussed, the circumstances surrounding Richard's death were altered with this update, in such a way that, frighteningly, it does actually become a possibility. Still though, I think it's pretty unlikely that this is actually the case, considering there's a much more pressing matter at hand here, and that is the very strange circumstances surrounding Sigurd's dad. For those that don't know, Sigurd's dad is a character that's spoken of at several points throughout his entries. We never learn very much about him, but it's clear that their connection is one that Sigurd values, and as the logs continue, we're reminded of him more and more frequently, reminiscences that coincide with the increasingly dire state of the crew's situation. Obviously then, the notion that Sigurd's dad is somehow in the vent of the company ship is frankly absurd, but it does present us with a fairly important reality check, because Sigurd, I think it's safe to say, is delusional. It's been a strong suggestion in the community for many years that these logs should not be treated as completely reliable narration, not only because Sigurd himself is an in-universe figure, but also because of his clearly declining mental state as the logs go on. All of this matters because the length to which we understand Sigurd's perspective entirely affects how we perceive several of the other elements of these texts, not the least of which being the various paranormal or unexplainable encounters, such as the screams behind the company wall and the voice he hears over the walkie-talkie in the infamous log Golden Planet. Though these happenings certainly seem significant to the broader story of the game, we now have to truly confront the question of just how real any of it actually was. Sigurd's mind is slipping, and even though he seems at least partially aware of it, I think he's unfortunately pretty powerless to actually do anything about it. Now, let's back up for a second. Usually with matters like this one, I'm pretty hesitant to make such a definitive call on how a plot point ought to be interpreted. Even though signs definitely point to Sigurd losing his mind at this point in the logs, I haven't supplied you with any sort of definitive proof that this is actually what's happening. And going off of just what's said in Team Synergy, well, there isn't any. It's still completely possible that there really is some paranormal force at play, but contrary to popular belief, and indeed maybe even popular knowledge, Team Synergy is not the only log that was revealed in version 70. This is something you probably haven't seen anyone else talk about, but there's actually another log too, one which I myself wasn't even aware of until I began editing this very video. Allow me to explain. At some point after recording the original version of this upload, when I sat down to start putting together the visuals, I realized that I still needed to collect this piece of footage, the one that basically showed the entry on the ground, as well as me picking it up and reading it for myself. So on June 19th, just a couple of days before this video will have been uploaded, I set out to go and record this. But as I approached the log on Artifice, something happened that caught me by complete surprise. Because the log that I picked up wasn't Team Synergy at all, instead being a completely different entry, Letter of Resignation, which takes place not on October 10th, but October 13th. As you can probably tell by the footage on screen, I didn't really know what to do when I first found this. How could this even happen? This log didn't exist here before. In fact, up until this point, it didn't exist at all. But that name, Letter of Resignation, was one I definitely recognized. As I touched on in the beginning of this video, version 70 didn't exactly come out of nowhere. The update was teased and talked about quite extensively by Zeekers on Patreon for several months prior to it actually releasing, and in one particular post, made on May 25th, 2025, the dev had first clued us in to the idea that new Sigurd logs were on the horizon, and we were even given their names: Team Synergy, Letter of Resignation, and Sun. According to Zeekers though, these logs weren't just going to be new, but once implemented, they would also mark the finale of the Sigurd series. That's right, these are the names of the final 3 logs in Sigurd's story, logs that, once added, would officially render the chronology complete. The only catch being that, at this point in the development process, Zeekers still hadn't decided if he was going to release all 3 of these logs at once or spread them out over the course of the next couple of updates. Eventually, when version 70 dropped, it seemed we had our answer though. Team Synergy, the third to last record in Sigurd's journey, was placed on the surface of Artifice. And that was that, until inexplicably, literally just 24 hours prior to me realizing I needed that simple piece of footage, a change to the game code was made completely out of nowhere. It had no version update and didn't include any patch notes. But what it did was alter the existing Team Synergy log and replace it with this penultimate entry instead. I can't stress enough how weird this is, and I have absolutely no idea why an alteration like this would ever have been made in the first place, especially so long after version 70's initial launch. I have a feeling this was probably some kind of mistake, but it's a good thing I take a long time to make these videos, because if I didn't, there's virtually no way I would have known of its existence at all. So all of this is to say that for one reason or another, Zeekers has perhaps inadvertently blessed us with one more new log to talk about this update. But what I hadn't expected when picking this up by accident back on Artifice was that Letter of Resignation would easily be the longest and simultaneously the most important entry we've ever had. So it's with great pleasure that I'll read it in full for you now. Date: October 13th, 1968. This is Desmond. Sigurd is unable to write, but I feel the need to keep a record, and none of us are sleeping tonight. After the incident, he's practically catatonic. He says he heard his father's voice in the air intake vent under the charger several days ago. I wish he'd told us before the incident, but I'm liable to believe he's being honest, at least to himself. In this state, he'd be a danger to himself and others, so we've been reduced to a 3-man crew. A hard blow, I'm afraid, we can't afford. This is how Jess and Lucas recounted it. There was a scraping sound, of which they soon located the vent as the source. They took this as a sign of the ship needing maintenance and perhaps an oil change. Lucas went to grab the tools just to check. However, before he returned, the vent burst with a chunky red fluid, with what were almost surely bits of bone and hair, which spread across the floor like the contents of a clogged toilet. Fully emptying the vent, cleaning out the ship, and eradicating the stench was a challenge I wouldn't wish on anyone, especially with Sigurd trying to stop us. Now, the smell of bleach burning our nostrils is a relief. Why? Why did it happen? I cannot reasonably entertain Sigurd's explanation that somehow his father was inside the ship. He's always been quite imaginative, not to mention his current state. I believe the crew before us, or the crew before that, is simply responsible for attempting to avoid a fine, and the method was to hide their mistake. The victims' remains have been dumped out, and we will never identify them. It doesn't matter. As I stated, this is unsustainable. I have followed every step of the handbook. I have tried to make things work. I have maximized our efficiency. I have kept our morale in check. Now, even I am wringing my hands. It's like this job is just designed to break me. I've done everything right, I've done everything I can, and still, we would have to pull a miracle just to get back on track. The only course of action left is to do what I cannot. So maybe I will. I will hand in my letter of resignation personally. It's time to see who we've been working for. No, Sigurd, this is not our real job. Our work has just begun, and there is no way out but further in. The first time I read this log, I'll admit, silly as it may sound, a genuine chill came down my spine. Not because Desmond's writing style is particularly emotional, not because of the realization that Sigurd is in fact crazy, and not even because we finally have another piece of writing from Desmond himself. No, for me, the most important part of any of what's just been read is that final paragraph. Because, as some of you have probably already begun to figure out, Desmond's letter of resignation is almost certainly metaphorical, and what it seems to refer to is a lot bigger and more powerful than a simple slip of paper. Nope, instead, it's as the man says himself, the only way out is further in, because Desmond's letter of resignation is actually the drill beneath the company building platform, a device whose imposing presence has taunted and confused us since this game's release. We've known for some time that the drill likely belonged to Desmond because of a piece of concept art that was published to Zeeker's Patreon before Lethal Company's release. But this is the missing piece of the puzzle. The Desmond log from October 9th wasn't the man's last resort. This was, and if you're still not convinced, then I'm also happy to say that for the first time since release, version 70 has also brought a small change to this device itself. Previously, this entire model was completely static. Aside from the light switch to toggle the power on this platform, nothing else here was interactable in any way. But now, this small hatch on the back can be opened and closed. It's not much, but combined with everything else we've seen, it might just be one of the most significant changes ever made in terms of Lethal Company's lore. As you can probably tell, I'm brimming with excitement about all of this. I'm sure many of you are too. Over the last couple of years on this channel, we've pored over the details of this game time and time again. We've discussed and rediscussed mysteries like this one many, many times over to no avail. And all of a sudden, almost entirely because of a piece of information that seems like it wasn't even supposed to be here in the first place, the mysteries of the company are at long last actually starting to unravel. So, only one question remains. Where do we go from here? Well, if it isn't apparent enough by this point, let me be the one to break the news. Although it's easy to forget, Lethal Company is still technically in early access, but according to what Zeeker's has said in the past, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case for much longer. We frankly don't know if content updates are going to continue past the release of version 1.0, but what we do know is that when that update comes, the main storyline of the game is going to be complete. So, all of that's to say that we're in the home stretch. and I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if any day now we received word that work had begun on translating that ending to screen. I think the next couple of months are going to be a very exciting time for Lethal Company. Zeekerss really seems to be on the verge of something big, so you bet I'm looking forward to covering all of it as it comes down the pipeline. The next update we're going to receive is apparently version 75, and I'm not sure if it's one I'll be covering in a dedicated video like this. I guess it just depends on how much new lore there is to explore. But once all of Sigurd's logs are out, I'll almost certainly be creating a dedicated video going through his entire story front to back, so be on the lookout for that. Beyond that though, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. One thing's for certain though, and that's that it's a very exciting time to be a company employee. Not that you'd know anything about that, I guess, seeing as you're a bird and all. And speaking of which, well, I guess I should probably get back to work. Except, oh geez, look at the time. I just went and blabbered the whole day away again, didn't I? Man, I gotta stop doing that. I guess I'll get headed back to the ship then. I'd asked to borrow one of your eggs to make sure I have the quota secured, but, well, you've already made it pretty apparent that you're not too keen on that, so whatever, we'll make it happen. Either way, thanks for listening today. And thanks to you as well. It's always a pleasure making these videos, and I look forward to bringing you plenty more in the future. This is Everberon. I'll see you again soon, and have a good one.